And I'm very concerned with that direction. There may be some private schools out there, some private colleges that you'll be able to go to and not have to follow the system, but it's very concerning. Questions?
Joe, what are they going to do about teaching the teachers? Are they going to give them CEUs, or are they going to force the teachers to go back?
Well, let me tell you, this is a test that we don't know the standards yet. And next year we start testing it.
Wonderful.
And I just received an article that said it's no different than having a doctor do something completely different than what they've done in the past. My wife took a Common Core class this summer, and yes, they have team leaders. They're basically training a trainer is really the best way to put it. They're training trainers in order to be able to work out as much as they can, but we don't have all the information yet. I mean, this is fly by the seat of the pants, to be real honest with you.
The changes that were made to the ARPA, that was pretty much executive orders, right?
I do not believe that. No, that was a House. That was a Senate bill. That was a Senate bill. It came from the Senate. House approved it.
Yeah, because the book that I had said it was for.
I could be wrong. I'm pretty sure I was reading that today, and I could be wrong, but I remember seeing a Senate bill next to it, but I could be wrong.
One of the things that I saw was about the writing test. That they're no longer going to do like a handwritten essay like Florida Writes is right now. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't. Right now, this only addresses two subject areas. It addresses reading and it addresses mathematics. And we really don't know with the rest of it. I can't tell you, I used to teach chemistry, so the first thing I did was I looked at the Florida Next Generation standards for chemistry. Chemistry wasn't listed. We have a physical science, we have a life science, we have something else, and there's no more lab requirement. We used to be required to do a lab. Right now, the state still has in place other things besides Common Core that say we will teach this many hours of math, we will teach this many hours of science. So we're still probably going to have a lot of science, but what I see happening in the long run is if you don't have to do it, you usually let it fall out of curriculum.
Joe, was there a specific country that they looked at that they may have modeled this after, like Asia or Europe or whatever?
No, from what I can tell, I think that long term they would like everybody to do this, but this is really, there's no model out there that says this is just like that. And that's where it's real concerning.
So there's no standards to see if this has been successful?
No. Well, there's one district that I know that tried it, and the results have been pretty bad.
Well, as we spoke earlier, this was tried in Palm Beach County, similar to this, about 1992, called the Unified Curriculum. And what it basically addressed was that every child, on any given day, on any given hour, would be learning the same subject to address the transient movement of, especially the migrant workers. So that if they switch schools, they would still be in the same basic area of the book. It was a total disaster after about 5 years and $11 million they scrapped it.
And I believe that the teacher that's with that student knows where the student is better than anybody else. When you do a blanket policy like this, you have no idea where that child really is coming in. Especially with different migrant students that come and go, I think that an individual assessment is a lot better to be able to get a child where they need to be. That teacher knows, learns about family issues and knows, the student's learning style. I mean, all those things matter.
As far as the MRI, isn't that a huge privacy issue? Like each individual, we have to sign over privacy to give our medical records elsewhere.
Not according to this. Well, let me tell you, with the data mining, has students' name, date of birth. When you fill out the application for school, if you have religious affiliation on there anywhere, it goes. All this stuff is on there now. So not just that, but your values are going to be data mined as well. I mean, all of it is built into this system.
So the government just controls that and just takes it. It's not, we have no choice. As far as
you have limited control over it. If it's on your student's record, if it's on your child's record, it's automatic. I mean, they have said that sharing between federal agencies is automatic. Well, if the state's participating in this, then they're going to require certain data. The school district has to provide it, or else you don't get funding.
How can I pull my child's records away from the history that's already been instilled and prevent anything else being put in?
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Disappear?
Well, it's, we're early on in some of these stages. And I'm on the board, and I don't know how to answer your question. What I would do is I would talk to the school and ask for a copy of the record. See what's in there. That's the only way you're going to know, is to see what's in there and ask what you can have removed.
What else was I going to say? He was speaking of other countries that we might have used for an example. I read today that Europe is very big on nationalized standards. However, so are several, if not majority, other governments are doing the same thing, and most of them fail.
Well, this is a form of socialism. You know, I mean, this is a step into socialism.
Very
Joe,
much so.
this has a distinct ability to sidestep HIPAA law.
Absolutely.
You know, because HIPAA law will no longer mean anything, and if they can do medical procedures against your children, that could also exclude them from pre-existing conditions, and also they have the ability to, if they do DNA, they can look at a person who's carrying a potential gene, a young lady who has the gene for possibly breast cancer, and eliminate them out of the medical system. So this is pretty dangerous.
Well, but with what's coming on the medical side, that's a real concern as well.
Yeah.
They want to eliminate people from being able to choose their careers too, that will be chosen.
Well, that's true. If they track you early, they can separate. You know, they can choose what classes you take from that point on. And I don't know if that's a long-term goal, but it's a long-term possibility.
And what we've been getting in this country for quite a while through the education system is not the teachers as much as it is the National Teachers Union and the people planning these things. Collectivist thinking. You don't think individually. You think differently. You belittle. I mean, we can see things nationally, just like with this verdict in the Zimmerman trial, where you having double jeopardy being questioned because the jury made a good decision, but then it didn't go their way, and they're going to use it for racial divide, but get collectivist thinking. A lot of people believe that it was racially motivated and so forth. Well, first of all, racism was promoted by evolution. It talks about the preservation of the favored races in the subtitle of the book. The Bible teaches that there is one race. We all came from the same blood, and all people came from the sons of Noah. There happen to be a lot of different races, different pigmentations of skin. But we are getting into that mode where we are being dumbed down, and that's what this curriculum is about. They give you one bad program, and like you got the CAT test, and then people have to teach to that, don't teach what they want to teach and need to teach. You got the No Child Left Behind, so you come along with something, we're going to replace this, like it's better, it's worse. Each time they put something in, it's worse. We need to realize the federal government's not our friend. We need more people contacting our state legislators and our congressmen about these things.
The only way that you can get this stopped in Florida is if you can convince our legislators that this is not good.
How can I get their time?
You're going to have to we have a representative, we have an 8-to-1 right here, and what is your title, Lizzie? I'm sorry.
Hey, let's see.
Okay, Ruby is legislative aide to Dr. Pigman, and I'm sure that you can talk to her and find out what you need to do from there.
Well, it's not.
And,
obviously, if she's sitting in here, she's
it doesn't matter. You still have to get that one-on-one contact. Make a phone call, find out what you have to do, send an email, fill out their email, call, do whatever you have to. And this is the time they're not in session. They probably have a little bit more time for you now than they do when they're in session, as far as the communication goes. But that's the only way that it's going to be stopped, is if we get out and speak about
And
this
really,
issue.
one of the reasons why I wanted to have the meeting is to get it out there. There's a lot of people that wanted some, because it's all working.
And I will tell you that the noise is starting to rise to a level that they're concerned, because the Speaker of the House and the Senate President wouldn't have even had the conversation of pulling out a part if they weren't getting a lot of information. And I'm sure that's true with every representative that's out there. And I will tell you that it's an election year, and I think that the governor's a little bit nervous and spent a lot of time in different places. So it's a good time to change people's minds. But it's going to take, not just you calling, but finding somebody that's of like mind and having them call. Because if you can double the numbers, by having one person, triple the numbers by having 2 people, and then convince them to do the same thing, that's how things happen.
just like sales producing.
It's just like sales. That's what it is. It's sales.
If the state testing is being conducted through the federal government, which is corrupt as Lucifer himself, and that's the way I put that, how can we guarantee that the testing questions, stories, or any type of curricular products is given to my child is not going to corrupt her mental well-being? I don't want her learning about things.
You know, the problem that I have with digital testing is today when my child comes home, I can look at his paper and say, no, you know, that one was right. When it all goes online, how do I know whether the answer was right or not? How can I tell? They're not going to give me a copy of it. I don't get a copy of FCAT today. Nobody does. How do we know how accurate the test is? And then a few years ago, they came back with invalid test results. So anytime that we do something fully digital or that it never comes back for us to look at, we should always be suspicious. We should always be able, even if they released FCAT 2 years later, it wouldn't matter, at least to have some kind of accountability to see what it is, to know what they're being tested on.
Besides that, I'm more concerned over the topics that could be spoken
I understand, and there was a homeschool parent that I read about from Texas, and I don't remember where I read about it, but I read about him, and his child was going to a Christian school, and they had already adopted some of the Common Core curriculum as far as the early stages of it, and there was a story on there that was basically saying that communism was more productive than capitalism. And the parent was kind of outraged by it. And but if everything's taught online and it's all digitized, we're not going to have access to even know what our children are being taught.
If everything's taught online, do we need a teacher anymore?
It's not that it's all online, but I will tell you that I think is it next school year or is it the year after? One year we have to provide digital devices to kids. It's either next year or the year after. Next year, so the 14-15 school year, every student in our schools will receive some kind of digital device, and we haven't made a decision on that yet. We're going to have to buy a pilot. Don't put a hammer to it. Just take the battery out and let it sit there, you know, and then turn it back at the end of the year. But that's something that by state law we will be required to provide them with a tablet of some kind.
Well, we could be putting that.
And what kind of money are you talking about when you say that? That's a lot of.
Well, that's the biggest issue. Well, I do, based on some of the bulk buys that I've seen some for as little as $150 per device. But I think long term that we're going to end up replacing books with that is really long term where I think that it's headed.
Is it cheaper than a book?
It would be cheaper than a set of books, especially at high school level. If you spend $150, $200 for a chemistry book, then if you have 7 different books, I can see where it will become very competitive very quickly.
What about a little boy like my husband who drops it in the mud puddle?
I don't have the answers to those questions because we don't have those policies.
That's the reality.
I understand. We don't have those policies. I understand.
Apparently, the software step because Bill Gates put billions of dollars into the program to promote.
Well, you're absolutely right.
Because he's going to be controlling the software, and I know Obama was able to promote this to the governors, promising them all kind of things to cover up what was there, as if he was going to pay for it. And what I understand, our state would have to pay $19 billion to implement this program because all the stimulus money Obama got is not covering it.
Well, that's always a concern. Whenever it's no different than when you take a grant position, you have to decide, whether you're going to keep it or not when the grant money goes away. If it's something that you're going to do anyway, you probably ought to take the money. If it's something you weren't going to do anyway, you probably shouldn't take the money. But it's the same thing. If once you take the money, and it costs you more than what it used to. But whether it's the federal government or whether it's the state government, as an elected official, they give us more and more and more to do every year, and they don't give you all the money to make up for what those implementations are. Over time, they'll take some of the money back. And it's always a battle.